Okay, ready to dive into some seriously heavy stuff? Buddhism, the philosophy of Jesus, and the whole philosophy and theology thing.
Oh, yeah.
We got some scholarly articles all ready to go, but
Right.
this is not about, like, turning you into a scholar or anything. It's
Right.
more like we're giving your brain a cheat sheet
Okay.
to some really fascinating ideas.
It is a pretty fascinating spread of thought we've got here.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah,
ancient Eastern traditions and then modern Western philosophical debates.
exactly.
It's going to be interesting to see what we find out.
And speaking of connections, let's start with Buddhism.
All right.
Now, I know everyone's heard of the Four Noble Truths,
Mm-hmm.
but the thing that always gets me is how relevant they still are,
Yeah.
today.
Oh, for sure.
It's like Buddha was a therapist way ahead of his time.
That's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
You know, you think about those truths,
Yeah.
that suffering is inherent and it's caused by craving, ending craving and suffering.
Right.
And there's a path to do that.
Yeah. It's almost like a blueprint for dealing with addiction.
Oh, wow.
Think about it.
Yeah.
That constant desire for more and that dissatisfaction when you don't get it.
Yeah.
And that cycle of suffering that happens.
Right. Right.
It's all there in those ancient teachings.
And it kind of makes me think about how
Mhm.
mindfulness is so popular these days.
Right.
Do you think that that's kind of like a secular version of the Eightfold Path?
I think that's a really fascinating connection.
Yeah.
That emphasis on right mindfulness, right effort,
Yeah.
right concentration. It's
Mhm.
all about like cultivating awareness and understanding of our own minds.
Right.
And I think that that is something that resonates with people today,
Yeah.
even if they're not Buddhist.
Right. It's not just about going to a monastery or something.
Right.
It's about applying these ideas to your everyday life.
Exactly.
Okay. But there's this other Buddhist concept that I always find a little mind-bending.
Okay.
This idea of non-self.
Like if we're not our bodies, we're not our thoughts,
Yeah.
we're not our emotions, then what is left?
Mm-hmm.
It's kind of like saying, I am an illusion.
Well, it's not about like denying that you exist
All right.
in like a conventional sense.
Okay.
It's more about questioning this idea
Focus.
of a fixed and unchanging self.
Okay.
So like
Yeah.
imagine that you could rewind your life like a film.
Okay.
You would see yourself changing, you'd see yourself evolving, you'd see yourself being shaped by experiences.
Yeah.
And so Buddhism argues that that is the true nature of self,
Mm-hmm.
not some static entity that we hold on to.
So it's kind of like how scientists are talking about the brain now,
Yeah.
like how it's constantly rewiring itself and making
It's
connections and stuff.
Mm.
So you're a process, not a finished product.
Yeah, I think that's a great analogy.
Yeah.
It really challenges our kind of Western notion of the individual as a separate,
Right.
independent entity.
Yeah.
And I think this understanding has huge implications for how Buddhists view things like
Yeah.
rebirth and nirvana.
So let's talk about nirvana.
Okay.
It's not heaven, right?
Right, right.
But the sources mention this idea of like extinguished fire.
Mm-hmm.
Does that mean like annihilation?
Right.
Like consciousness just poof, it's gone.
Right.
That seems a little bleak.
It's tricky because we're trying to wrap our heads around a concept that
Yeah.
goes beyond our usual ways of thinking about things.
Okay.
Nirvana is a state of liberation from suffering
Okay.
that you achieve by extinguishing the fires of craving and delusion.
Right.
But what remains is kind of a mystery.
Oh.
Something that can't really be described in like ordinary
It's
language.
just kind of like trying to explain color to somebody who's been blind their whole
Right,
life.
exactly.
Yeah.
And I think this leads to kind of a key tension in Buddhist thought,
Hmm.
this rejection of eternalism, which is the idea that there's a permanent soul,
Right.
but also the rejection of nihilism, which is this belief that everything just ceases to exist.
Mm-hmm.
So Buddhism is kind of walking this middle path,
Okay.
but that path is shrouded in mystery.
So it's about embracing the unknown
Yeah.
and accepting
Yeah.
that some things are just beyond our grasp.
I think that's a big part of it.
Okay.
And it brings us to another really intriguing aspect of Buddhism,
Right.
this emphasis on higher knowledge.
Okay.
Not just like book smarts,
Right.
but direct experiential knowledge gained through deep meditation.
Okay.
And some of the sources mention some pretty wild stuff.
Like what?
Levitation, clairvoyance,
Yeah.
even telepathy.
Hold on. Are we talking about like superpowers here?
It's important to remember that the interpretation of these powers
Okay.
varies within different Buddhist traditions.
Okay.
Some take them literally, while others see them as metaphors
Okay.
for profound insights into the nature of reality.
So maybe not about actually flying,
Right.
but about transcending the limitations of our ordinary perception.
Precisely. And the sources highlight 3 types of this higher knowledge that are particularly relevant to our understanding of Buddhism.
All right.
So first, you have retrocognition,
Okay.
which is direct experience of past lives.
Oh, wow.
This provides evidence for the whole rebirth concept.
Okay. That's pretty mind-blowing.
Yeah.
But how do they know that it's a past life?
Right.
Not just like a vivid dream or something.
That's where the next type of higher knowledge comes in,
That's
the
right.
divine eye.
Okay.
It's like a spiritual X-ray vision
Okay.
that allows one to see the workings of karma, how actions in past lives shape our present circumstances.
So you can actually see the cause and effect of actions over multiple lifetimes.
That's a claim.
Wow.
And the third type is knowledge of the destruction of taints.
Okay.
This is basically the experiential confirmation that the path to liberation is working. It's like finally seeing the finish line after a long and arduous race.
So it's not just faith, it's about direct knowledge. Like a scientist verifying a theory through experiments.
Right.
But doesn't that contradict the whole faith is a leap idea?
Well, that's where Buddhism gets really interesting.
Okay.
It's a tradition that values both faith and empirical investigation.
Mm-hmm.
But this empiricism is focused inward on the mind itself.
So it's like their laboratory is consciousness itself.
Exactly.
They're experimenting with their own minds to test these fundamental truths.
That's a great way to put it.
Wow.
And this leads us to one of the most complex and often misunderstood concepts in Buddhism,
Okay.
the 12-link chain of dependent origination.
12 links. Sounds like a heavy philosophical chain.
It is a heavy philosophical chain,
Yeah.
but essentially it's a detailed map of how suffering arises
Okay.
and how we can break free from it.
Yeah.
It starts with ignorance, which leads to mental formations,
Okay.
then consciousness, then physical form, the senses, contact with the world, sensations, craving, grasping, becoming, birth, and finally, old age and death.
Whoa, okay, that's quite a journey.
Yeah.
So basically, ignorance is the root of all evil.
You could say that ignorance in this context refers to a lack of understanding of the Four Noble Truths, the impermanence of all things,
Okay.
and the interconnectedness of reality.
Right.
This ignorance fuels the cycle of craving and suffering.
So knowledge is power, or at least liberation.
In a sense, yes.
Okay.
But it's not just any knowledge.
Right.
It's a deep experiential understanding of these core Buddhist principles.
So it's not about memorizing doctrines. It's
Right.
about transforming your whole way of seeing the world.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that transformation is what ultimately leads to the extinction of suffering and the
Right.
attainment of nirvana.
Wow. Okay, we've gone pretty deep into Buddhism here.
Yeah.
I'm starting to see why it's fascinated people for centuries.
It's a rich and complex tradition with a lot to offer.
Yeah.
But now let's shift gears a little bit and explore a figure who revolutionized Western thought.
Okay.
Jesus.
From Eastern wisdom to the heart of Western religion.
That's right.
This is quite a leap.
It is.
One thing I thought was fascinating from the sources is that early Christians often saw Jesus as a philosopher.
That's right.
Yeah.
Some early Christian writings actually depict him wearing the robes
Oh, wow.
of Greek philosophers.
Really?
Yeah, they viewed his teachings as a way of life,
Okay.
a wisdom tradition concerned with virtue and ethics.
So not just about religious dogma,
Right.
but about living a good life.
Precisely.
Okay.
And that's where the emphasis on virtue ethics comes in.
Okay.
It's not so much about following a set of rules,
Yeah.
but about cultivating certain character traits,
Okay. Like what?
like love, compassion, forgiveness,
Mm-hmm.
even humility.
That's a pretty tall order.
It is.
Especially that whole love your enemies thing.
Right.
How practical is that in the real world?
It's definitely a challenging teaching, one that pushes us beyond our comfort zones,
Right.
but it points to this radical ethic of love and forgiveness that was revolutionary for its time
Yeah.
and continues to inspire people today.
And it wasn't just abstract preaching, right?
Yeah, not at all.
Jesus was known for using parables,
Yes.
those short stories, with a moral punchline.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Like that one about the Good Samaritan
Oh, yeah.
challenges our assumptions about who deserves our compassion.
Right.
And it highlights the importance of extending kindness,
Yeah.
even to those we might consider outsiders.
It's like those fables we all heard as kids, but with a deeper philosophical message weaving in.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And those parables have resonated with people for centuries,
Right.
sparking reflection and debate about the nature of love,
Yeah.
forgiveness, and justice.
It's amazing how these ancient teachings can still feel so relevant today.
It is.
Yeah.
And I think it speaks to the enduring power of wisdom traditions
Yeah.
to offer guidance for navigating the complexities of human experience.
Okay, so we've explored the depths of Buddhism. We've gotten a taste of Jesus's philosophy.
Right.
Now I'm really curious about how all of this connects to the broader world of philosophy and theology.
Well, that's where things get really interesting.
Okay.
It's a relationship that has been explored and debated for centuries.
So is it like a happy marriage,
Well,
a constant battle, or something in between?
it's more like a complex dance
Okay.
with different partners and steps throughout history.
Okay.
Sometimes they're in perfect harmony, and sometimes they're stepping on each other's toes. Think of it like this. Sometimes philosophy's trying to prove theology right, and sometimes it's questioning its assumptions, and sometimes it's just trying to understand it better.
So it's not always a head-on collision,
Right.
but the sources did mention some tension
Yeah.
in modern philosophy or religion. Some folks think it's too focused on Christianity,
Right.
while others say it's not theological enough.
Right.
How could it be both?
Well, it's a balancing act for sure.
Yeah.
On the one hand, there's a concern that philosophy of religion often uses Christian ideas as a starting point,
Okay.
and it neglects the richness of other religious traditions.
Right.
On the other hand, you have theologians arguing that some philosophers are so focused on logic and arguments that they kind of miss the heart of religious experience.
So it's like some want more breadth exploring different faiths, while others want more depth going deeper into the mysteries of belief.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And this tension kind of plays out in debates about methodology, like what's considered fair game in philosophy of religion?
Right.
Can you use revealed texts? Can you use personal experiences? Or should it just be all logic and reason?
So it's like figuring out the rules of the game.
Yeah.
Can you quote scripture in a philosophy paper?
Right.
Can you bring up that time that you felt a divine presence?
Those are the kinds of questions that philosophers are grappling with, and it gets even trickier when you consider the nature of religious experience itself.
Okay.
Those mystical moments, the feelings of transcendence, that sense of encountering something other.
Right.
Can philosophy really make sense of that?
Yeah, it's like trying to capture lightning in a bottle.
Yeah.
How do you analyze something that feels so subjective, so beyond words?
It is a challenge.
Yeah.
And some philosophers try to explain these experiences away as just psychological tricks in the mind, if you will.
Okay.
Others argue that they offer genuine glimpses into a spiritual reality.
So is it all in our heads?
Yeah.
Or is there something more to it? It feels like a question that science can't fully answer.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It raises all sorts of questions about the nature of consciousness,
Okay.
the limits of our perception,
Yeah.
the possibility that there's more to reality than we can see or measure.
It's like that saying, if a tree falls in a forest and no one is around to hear it, does it make a sound? But in this case, it's more like, if someone has a profound religious experience but can't explain it scientifically,
Right.
does it have any validity?
That's a brilliant way to put it.
Yeah.
And this question about the validity of religious experience has huge implications for how we understand religious belief itself.
Okay.
Can faith be grounded in experience? Or does it always require a leap beyond reason and evidence?
So it circles back to that fundamental tension between faith and reason.
Yeah.
Can they work together?
Right.
Or are they always going to be at odds?
And it gets even more complicated when you factor in religious pluralism.
Okay.
The fact that there are so many different religions out there,
Right.
each claiming to have the truth.
Ah, yes, the age-old question, which religion is right? Or are they all just different paths up the same mountain?
Right.
It's enough to make your head spin.
It is a dizzying array of beliefs and practices, and philosophers of religion kind of explore this diversity through different models.
Okay.
Exclusivism, inclusivism,
Right.
and pluralism.
Okay, remind me how those work again.
Okay, so exclusivism says there's only one true religion,
Okay.
and all the others are wrong.
Right.
Inclusivism suggests that one religion is fully true,
Okay.
but others contain partial truths or can be interpreted in a way that aligns with the true religion.
Okay.
And pluralism says all religions are equally valid paths
Okay.
to the same ultimate reality.
So it's a spectrum of views from my way or the highway to all roads lead to Rum.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And these different models raise all sorts of fascinating questions like, what is truth?
Okay.
How do we know it?
Right.
Can there be multiple truths?
Yeah.
Can we learn from other religions even if we disagree with their core doctrines?
It's like trying to solve a giant philosophical jigsaw puzzle with pieces from all these different belief systems.
And that puzzle is what philosophers of religion are trying to piece together.
Right.
They're using logic and reason and historical analysis to try to make sense of this incredibly diverse landscape of faith.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture of philosophy and religion.
Right.
But I'm curious to dig into some specific theological concepts that philosophers are exploring.
Sure.
We touched on the Trinity earlier, which is mind-boggling enough.
Yeah.
But there's got to be more.
Oh, there's plenty more.
Oh.
One area that has generated endless debate is the problem of evil.
Right.
If God is all good and all powerful,
Yeah.
why is there so much suffering in the world?
Right. If God is so loving,
Yeah.
why do bad things happen to good people? Why do innocent people suffer?
And philosophers have come up with various theodicies, attempts to reconcile the existence of evil with the belief in a good and powerful God.
Okay.
Some argue that suffering is necessary for soul-making, that it builds character and helps us appreciate the good. Right. Others say it's the price of free will, that God had to give us the choice to do evil in order to make our love for him meaningful.
So it's like they're trying to find a loophole in the cosmic equation.
Right.
Can you really justify suffering no matter how you spin it?
That's a question that each person has to wrestle with for themselves.
Right.
But this ongoing effort to grapple with the problem of evil shows how deeply humans crave meaning and understanding, even in the face of pain and tragedy.
Right.
And it highlights the role of philosophy in pushing us to think critically about our beliefs.
Okay.
Even the most fundamental ones.
So it's like philosophy is holding theology's feet to the fire.
Yeah, that's a great way to put it.
Yeah.
Making it answer tough questions.
Yeah.
And defend its positions.
And this questioning extends to another big topic.
Yeah.
The afterlife.
Right.
Heaven, hell, reincarnation. Those age-old questions about what happens after we die.
It's the ultimate mystery.
Yeah. What happens when the lights go out?
Yeah.
Do we just cease to exist, or is there something more?
Philosophers are exploring all sorts of possibilities. Some defend traditional notions of heaven and hell as literal places of reward and punishment.
Right.
Others offer more metaphorical interpretations, seeing them as states of being rather than physical locations.
Right.
And some draw on philosophical concepts like personal identity and consciousness to argue for an afterlife that's radically different from traditional conceptions.
So it's like they're looking at the afterlife through different lenses, theological, philosophical, even scientific.
And this multifaceted approach is really pushing the boundaries of our understanding. It's not just about accepting or rejecting religious dogma.
Right.
It's about using all the tools at our disposal to explore the possibilities, to imagine what an afterlife might entail.
Right, if it exists at all.
It's like philosophy is giving us permission to ask the big questions, even the ones that seem unanswerable.
And in the process, it's expanding our minds, challenging our assumptions, and deepening our appreciation for the mystery of existence.
Okay, we've talked about the afterlife, the problem of evil.
Yeah.
Pretty heavy stuff.
It is.
But there's another area where philosophy and religion intersect.
Okay.
That I'm curious about: ethics. How do we know what's right and wrong in a religious context?
That's a fundamental question.
Yeah.
And it leads to all sorts of interesting debates about the source of morality. Does it come from God, or is it grounded in human reason?
Right.
Is something right because God commands it? Or does God command it because it's right?
It's like those head scratchers. It's like trying to figure out which came first, the chicken or the egg, God or morality.
Exactly.
And philosophers have come up with different theories to try to answer those questions.
Okay, like what?
So you have divine command theory that says that morality is whatever God decrees. You have natural law theory that argues that morality is inherent in the order of creation. And then you have virtue ethics that focuses on cultivating character traits that lead to a good life.
So it's not just about blindly following religious rules. It's about understanding the underlying principles and making informed ethical decisions.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And this philosophical approach to religious ethics is especially important when we face moral dilemmas.
Okay.
Those situations where different values clash.
Right.
Or where religious beliefs seem to conflict with secular ones.
Like debates about abortion or euthanasia.
Exactly.
Issues where people's deeply held religious beliefs often collide.
Right.
Yeah.
And philosophers of religion can help us navigate these complex issues by providing a framework for ethical reasoning, clarifying the values at stake, and exploring different perspectives.
So it's like philosophy gives us a toolkit for ethical decision-making, helping us think through these tough issues with more clarity and compassion.
And that toolkit is becoming even more essential as we face new ethical challenges in the 21st century.
Like what kind of challenges? What's on the horizon for religious ethics?
Well, one area that's generating a lot of discussion is the ethics of artificial intelligence.
Okay.
How do we ensure that AI is developed and used in a way that aligns with our moral values, including those informed by religious beliefs?
Like we're stepping into uncharted ethical territory here.
Yeah.
How do you program morality into a machine?
Right.
Can a robot have a soul?
These are questions that philosophers of religion are starting to explore, drawing on traditional ethical frameworks and developing new ones to address the unique challenges posed by AI.
So it's like philosophy is helping us prepare for a future where technology blurs the lines between human and machine, forcing us to rethink what it means to be moral beings in a rapidly changing world.
And this exploration is pushing us to consider some really profound questions about the nature of consciousness, the meaning of life, and our responsibilities to each other and to the planet.
Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground in this part of the deep dive.
We have.
From the problem of evil to the ethics of AI.
Yeah.
It's been a whirlwind tour of the intersection of philosophy and religion.
And it's really just a glimpse into the vast and fascinating landscape of ideas that philosophers of religion are exploring.
But before we move on to the final part,
I
want to circle back to those intriguing details and anecdotes that we talked about earlier.
Yeah.
They really help bring these abstract concepts to life.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
They add a human dimension to these philosophical debates, reminding us that these aren't just abstract ideas.
Right.
They're connected to real people and real experiences.
Like that image of the Buddha's birth with the elephant and the prophecies of greatness.
Right.
It really captures the sense of wonder and possibility that surrounds his life and teachings.
And that analogy of the Dharma as a raft.
Oh, yeah.
It's such a simple but powerful way to understand the role of Buddhist teachings.
Yeah.
In helping us navigate the challenges of life.
And those debates between early Christians about the role of philosophy.
Right.
They show that these questions about faith and reason have been around for centuries.
Yeah, and there are no easy answers.
And those anecdotes about modern philosophers wrestling with the problem of evil or the nature of consciousness, they remind us that these aren't just academic exercises.
Right.
They're grappling with the fundamental mysteries of human existence.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've explored the big ideas and the intriguing details.
Yeah.
But I'm curious, what's something that you're personally taking away from this deep dive?
You know, what strikes me is the incredible diversity of human thought.
Yeah.
When it comes to religion and philosophy.
Right.
You know, we've got ancient Eastern traditions, revolutionary Western figures, modern philosophers debating everything from the nature of reality to the ethics of AI. Yeah. It's just a testament to the power of the human mind.
Right.
To grapple with the big questions.
Yeah.
And to seek meaning and purpose in a complex world.
It's like we've opened a Pandora's box of ideas.
Yeah.
And it's both exhilarating and a bit overwhelming.
It is.
Yeah.
But I think that's a good thing.
Yeah.
It means we're engaging with the richness and complexity of these topics.
Right.
And that's where the real learning happens.
Okay, so we've got one more part of this deep dive to go.
Right.
Stay tuned, and we'll be back soon to explore even more fascinating territory at the intersection of religion and philosophy. All right, we're back and ready to wrap up our deep dive into religion and philosophy. It's been quite a journey so far. Buddhism, the philosophy of Jesus, the whole relationship between philosophy and theology.
We've covered a lot of ground for sure, but you know what strikes me?
What's that?
This isn't just some neat and tidy field of study.
Right.
There's a lot of tension built into these topics.
Yeah, you're right. Every answer seems to lead to like 10 more questions.
Exactly.
And the sources we read really highlighted that tension.
Yeah.
Especially when it comes to the role of philosophy in interpreting religious claims.
Right.
Can philosophy actually prove or disprove religious beliefs?
Right.
Or is that just a recipe for a headache?
Well, that's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Yeah.
I mean, some philosophers think that reason and logic can totally lead us to a belief in God.
Okay.
Or validate certain religious doctrines.
Right.
But then others are like, whoa, hold on.
Yeah.
Faith is about personal commitment, revelation,
Mm-hmm.
things that go beyond those philosophical proofs.
So it's back to that classic tug-of-war between faith and reason.
It always seems to come back to that.
Yeah. Are they doomed to clash? Or can they, like, find a way to coexist?
Right. It's like they're two different languages trying to have a conversation.
Yeah, exactly. And even within philosophy of religion, there's this tension, right?
Absolutely.
Between those who think it should just describe beliefs.
Right.
And those who think it should actually tell us how to live.
Mm-hmm.
So is philosophy just a detached observer?
Right.
Or can it offer some wisdom for how we actually live our lives?
Right. Can it help us live better, not just think better?
Exactly. And that leads to another question that keeps popping up.
Yeah.
Where are the boundaries between philosophy of religion and other fields?
Right.
Like theology, ethics, even science.
Exactly. Can they borrow ideas from each other, or should they stay in their own lanes?
Yeah. It's like those Venn diagrams we all had to make in school.
Right.
Where do the circles overlap and where do they go their separate ways?
And all of this tangle of questions and overlaps,
Yeah.
it leads to this incredible diversity of topics that philosophers of religion are actually working on today.
Okay, so give me the highlights. What are the big hot button issues?
All right, well, one area that is just buzzing right now is the intersection of religion and science.
Yeah.
Can those two worldviews even hold hands?
Right.
I mean, can religious beliefs survive alongside all these scientific discoveries?
Right.
Or are they headed for a messy divorce?
It's a question that feels more and more urgent.
Yeah.
As science keeps making these like mind-blowing discoveries about the universe.
Right.
Like, how do you reconcile those ancient creation stories with like the Big Bang?
Exactly. And philosophers of religion are wrestling with those questions.
Yeah.
We're really digging into those scientific findings, thinking about what they mean for religious belief, and asking if traditional doctrines need an update.
Okay.
Maybe even a total overhaul in light of all this new knowledge.
So it's not about like clinging to outdated beliefs just because they're comfortable.
Right.
It's about being open to new evidence.
Exactly.
Even if it shakes things up a bit.
Yeah, I think that's the spirit.
Yeah.
This open-minded dialogue between faith and science. It's making us rethink some really fundamental stuff.
Okay.
The nature of reality, what is humanity's role in the cosmos, even what are the limits of what we can know.
Wow.
That's a wild ride.
It really is.
Yeah.
It's like science is giving religion this much-needed wake-up call.
I like that.
It's like, hey,
Yes.
you got to evolve and adapt
Yeah,
if you want to stay relevant
absolutely.
in a world that's constantly changing.
Yeah. And another area where philosophy of religion is really making a difference is in these discussions about religious diversity.
Oh, right.
Yeah.
We touched on this earlier with religious pluralism.
Right.
But there's so much more to say about it.
Oh, yeah.
Like, how can we create a world where all these different faiths can coexist peacefully?
Right.
Especially when their beliefs clash.
It's a huge question.
Yeah, it's easy to just say, like, let's all just get along.
Yeah.
But in reality, it's much more complicated than that.
Yeah. People have really strong convictions.
Yeah.
And sometimes those convictions lead to conflict.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And that's where philosophers of religion come in.
Exactly. They're really digging into the details of interfaith dialogue, religious tolerance, trying to find common ground.
Okay.
And it's not about ignoring our differences.
Yeah.
It's about finding ways to really understand and respect each other,
Right.
even when we don't see eye to eye.
So it's less about arguing over who's right.
Yeah.
And more about, like, building bridges, bridges of understanding.
Absolutely. It's about recognizing our shared humanity, even when we have these big theological differences.
Beautifully put. And this work feels absolutely crucial.
Yeah.
Especially as we're living in this increasingly globalized world. All these different cultures and faiths are constantly like dumping into each other.
Exactly.
And we need ways to navigate those encounters peacefully, productively.
Absolutely.
It's like philosophy of religion is giving us the intellectual tools
Yeah.
to actually build a more harmonious world.
Right.
One conversation at a time.
That's a beautiful way to think about it.
So let's take a step back here.
Okay.
And think about everything we've talked about in this deep dive. It's been quite a journey.
It has.
We've covered so much.
Yeah, some of the most profound and challenging questions humanity has ever asked.
I know, right? We started with the history of Buddhism.
Right.
Then we went into the philosophy of Jesus. Then we talked about that whole complex relationship between philosophy and theology.
Yeah.
And all these cutting-edge debates that are shaping the field today.
It's a lot to take in.
My brain is definitely full, but in a good way.
I hear you.
It's like we stretched our minds in new directions. And I feel like I've got this whole new set of lenses to look at the world with.
That's what we were hoping for.
But I think it's important to remember, this isn't the end.
No, not at all.
It's really just the beginning, right?
This is just the starting point.
Yeah.
These topics are so rich and so complex. There's always more to learn.
Right.
There's always something new to discover.
So it's not about finding all the answers.
No.
But about keeping those questions alive.
Exactly.
Staying curious and just continuing to explore.
Yeah. And that's the beauty of these subjects. They really invite us into this lifelong journey of inquiry, this quest for understanding that can enrich our lives in really profound ways.
So what's like one final thought you want to leave our listeners with?
Okay, well, what really inspires me is that even with all the uncertainty, all the complexity, the vastness of what we don't know, the human mind just never stops searching for those answers.
Yeah.
We crave meaning. We crave purpose.
Yeah. And whether we find that in religion, in philosophy, in science, or some amazing combination of all three, I think the very act of searching is a testament to what it means to be human.
I love that. That's a beautiful note to end on.
It really is.
And I think it highlights something really crucial.
What's that?
The journey itself is just as important as the destination.
I agree.
It's that process of questioning, of exploring, of wrestling with these big ideas that really stretches our minds and our hearts.
Well said.
So to all you deep divers out there listening, keep asking those questions.
Keep searching.
Keep seeking wisdom and keep challenging your own assumptions.
Absolutely.
The world of religion and philosophy is vast and it's waiting to be explored.
It is.
And who knows what incredible discoveries you might make along the way.